What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. How are you doing today? I want to talk to you a little bit about the Avengers. This is not a review. I have not finished reading this book. I've only read the first 5 issues, which, for those of you who are not Avengers aficionados, that means that I've just finished reading the issue where Captain America joins the team. And reading these early issues of the Avengers, written by Stan Lee and drawn by Jack Kirby, it makes me realize just how much these two guys didn't really know what they were doing. And I'm not talking about their talents as creators. I think that Jack Kirby is one of the best artists to ever work in the comic book industry. I've always adored Jack Kirby's work, and I think that Stan Lee is a very accomplished writer, or was at this time, and I think that his showmanship is what turned Marvel Comics into the company that it is today. So I am not referring to their talents when I say that they didn't know what they were doing. I think that these two guys were very much flying by the seat of their pants when they were creating the Avengers series. I think that they were really just jumping into the series without much of a plan. And I think that it's incredible that doing that, this series still became one of the tentpole franchises of Marvel, if not the tentpole franchise of Marvel. And I want to explain a little bit what I'm talking about here when I say that they didn't really have a plan and that they didn't really know what they were doing. So a little bit of history here. I'm going to try to keep this very brief. 1961, Martin Goodman tells Stan Lee that he needs to do a superhero team comic book as a response to Justice League of America that had just started at DC Comics. So Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, they do the Fantastic Four. It becomes a hit, and from there we get the rest of the Marvel Universe. In 1962 we get the Hulk, we get Ant-Man, very late in 1962 we get Spider-Man, and then in 63 we get Thor, we get Iron Man, and then Spider-Man gets his own ongoing series, and then Hulk's series only lasted about 6 issues and then it was canceled. That might have been the first series of the Marvel Universe, the new Marvel Universe, if you will, to actually get canceled. But then in 63, I believe Avengers issue 1 is cover dated September of 63, if I'm not mistaken. And if I'm not mistaken, that's also the month that X-Men issue 1 came out. So the X-Men and the Avengers both come out in the same month. But then Avengers issue 1 comes out in September 63, and this is much more of an actual response to the Justice League than Fantastic Four was, because Fantastic Four is a brand new team. All of these characters are showing up for the first time. You didn't have a Human Torch ongoing series or an Invisible Woman ongoing series, and then all these guys meet together and join forces like you had with the Justice League and like you would have with the Avengers. So the Avengers is much more similar to the Justice League than the Fantastic Four was. But what's interesting about the Avengers is it has that dynamic. These are all characters who work by themselves, and then they're going to join forces. The problem is, Marvel did not have a very large stable of characters at this point. Like I said, the X-Men were showing up at the exact same time that Avengers issue 1 was showing up, and that like doubled the size of the Marvel Universe. Daredevil had not even shown up by this point. He wouldn't even show up until 1964. So you didn't have a very large group of superheroes that you could have join forces to save the world and become a team. Basically, the only heroes that you had who could potentially join the Avengers would be all of the ones who did: Ant-Man, Wasp, Thor, Iron Man, Hulk, and then also Spider-Man. And Spider-Man had only appeared about once before Avengers issue 1 came out. He might have appeared a couple times, but at that point, I don't think that they really knew that Spider-Man was going to be the big thing that he ended up being. They probably were like, yeah, sales on Amazing Fantasy 15 were pretty good, but we don't want to put that untested property in amongst the Avengers. We want the Avengers to be our big thing. We want it to be the biggest superheroes that Marvel has to offer. And unfortunately that meant we have to use Ant-Man and the Wasp, who I don't think a whole lot of people really cared about those characters at this time, but they were basically all that Marvel had to offer. And so this brings me to my point where I said that these guys were basically flying by the seat of their pants and didn't really have much of a plan, and were kind of just making things up as they went along. Because you may be thinking that it's a little weird that the Hulk is a founding member of the team. Back then, the Hulk was not the mindless tornado of rage that a lot of people think of him as today. He could talk. At this point in Marvel, I hadn't read any of the Silver Age Hulk comics, but at this point in the Avengers series, he could just be standing around talking to you as the Hulk, and he wouldn't be in a state of rage. He actually had to go to a secret lab, and Rick Jones had to push a button to turn him back into Bruce Banner. So at this point, he had already gone through a few changes on how he would transfer from Bruce Banner to the Hulk in his very brief solo run at this point. But you may be thinking it's a little weird that the Hulk is a founding member because he is not what you would think of as a team player. In fact, at any point in Marvel's history, even when the Hulk is at his least angry and least rage monstery, he's still not much of a team player. But that's all that they had to work with. They didn't have a whole lot of other characters that they could have join forces to become the Avengers. So they had to use the Hulk, and they had to use Thor and Iron Man. And it's very clear very early on that none of these characters really trust each other very much, because Iron Man, in almost every single issue that I've read so far, he's thinking to himself, oh, if only they knew that I am actually Tony Stark and that we're actually meeting in my house, and Tony Stark isn't just letting them borrow his house, but it's actually me, and I'm Tony Stark. And he's keeping all these secrets, and all of these characters are keeping secrets from each other. But immediately after issue 1, and I should go ahead and point out that the plot of issue 1 in a lot of ways is very similar to the 2012 Avengers movie, where Loki, he wants revenge on Thor, and so he's thinking maybe I can draw Thor out by making him think that the Hulk over here has committed a crime. So Loki frames the Hulk for this crime, and then Rick Jones is going to summon the Fantastic Four, so Loki diverts that radio signal, and then it reaches Thor, but it also reaches Iron Man, Ant-Man, and the Wasp, and then they all join forces and they all defeat Loki, and then they become a team. And you would think, okay, from that point on, they live happily ever after. That's not the case. Immediately, in issue 2, we have a character named the Space Phantom. He comes into Earth, and then he is able to take the shape of anyone else on the planet, and as soon as he does that, whoever he is assuming the shape of, they vanish into limbo. And the Space Phantom, his entire goal for this issue is to break up the Avengers. So he transforms into the Hulk, and then he does some stuff, and then the Avengers are like, I knew we couldn't trust the Hulk, so then they're fighting the Space Phantom, and then eventually the Space Phantom is defeated. And you would think at the end of the issue they would all be like, you know what, we went through some trials and tribulations, but we almost broke the team up, but now we love each other, let's all sing Kumbaya, and we're going to have a big hug. That's not how the issue ends. Hulk is like, okay, you guys very obviously don't like me. Whenever you thought you were fighting me and you were fighting the Space Phantom, I could tell that you guys really don't trust me, you really don't like me, so I'm just going to run away. I don't want to be part of your stupid team. And then in the next issue, these guys are chasing after the Hulk, and then he teams up with Namor, who wants to conquer the human race and subjugate them to his will. And of course, this is early Namor, where he's more of a bad guy. And I say early Namor as in early in the Marvel universe of the 1960s. Namor had been around for about 20 years by this point, but this particular version of Namor is much more villainous than later versions of the character would turn out to be. But Namor wants to conquer the human race. The Hulk is especially angry at the Avengers, so he says, sure, I'll help you, I hate humanity also. And then he winds up accidentally turning into Bruce Banner, and then he leaves. And then the next issue, the Avengers accidentally find Captain America because Namor finds his frozen body frozen somewhere, and then he throws him into the ocean, and then the Avengers find him. And at that point, that's really where the team solidifies into an actual team. It takes 4 issues, but it finally happens when Captain America joins the team. And I think it's very interesting that almost immediately, it seems like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby were like, okay, we can't use the Hulk. He's not really a team player. We don't want him to be part of the Avengers, so let's get rid of him just as soon as we put him on the team, and let's see if we can think of something else to put into the Avengers. And of course, both Stan Lee and Jack Kirby had worked on Captain America in the 1940s, so maybe after a few months of doing the Avengers series, they said, hey, you remember Captain America, right? What if we brought him back? What if we had some crazy story where he's been frozen in suspended animation for 20 years? And it's like, yeah, okay, the fans will buy it, sure, let's do that. So eventually they found a suitable replacement for the Hulk. What's really interesting about this, and I really want to visit the Marvel, the alternate universe where things took a different path, because out of all of the characters who were showing up in the Avengers at this point, Thor, Iron Man, Ant-Man and the Wasp, they all had their own solo series at this point. Ant-Man and the Wasp, they were showing up in Tales to Astonish. Thor was showing up in Journey into Mystery. And Tony Stark, Iron Man, he was showing up in Tales of Suspense. Hulk was the only one who did not have his own ongoing series at this point. So if they wanted to, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby could have done anything that they wanted to with the Hulk. They didn't have to keep him as the grumpy, angry loner that he was in the Hulk series. If they wanted to, they could have completely transformed his character so that he was more of a team character. Any of the other characters, you didn't have that level of flexibility with them. him. You wouldn't be able to kill off Tony Stark or reveal his secret identity to the world. You wouldn't be able to do that in the Avengers series because Iron Man still had his own solo series in Tales of Suspense. You wouldn't be able to exile Thor from Asgard or have him be stuck in Donald Blake form in the Avengers series because he was still showing up in Journey into Mystery. All of those guys, you were very limited on what you could do with them. Not so with the Hulk. So I find it very interesting that they chose to go in the direction that they went. If they wanted to, they could have done what Peter David did in the 1980s, where they had Bruce Banner's intelligence in the Hulk's body. If they wanted to, they could have done some really crazy stuff with the Hulk, and they could have kind of transitioned him more into a team player than what he was in his 6-issue solo run. They didn't do that. They decided to keep him more or less recognizable as the kind of character that he was when he had his own solo series, and then they decided to bring Captain America into the mix. But I find it very interesting that potentially, they could have kept the Hulk around. People were probably thinking it's really weird that the Hulk has joined this team, but they could have kept him around, and they could have made him a little bit more of a grumpy ally, but still has a heart of gold, kind of like the Thing. The Thing, at times, he doesn't really like the Human Torch or Mr. Fantastic, but he still works with the Fantastic Four. They could have had the Hulk be more like that. And probably they could have done it. They could have gotten away with it because this was still very early in the Marvel Universe. They were making up everything. They could have done whatever they wanted to, and nobody would have cried foul because these guys created the Hulk. So nobody would have said, you guys don't know what you're doing. That's not true to the Hulk's character. They could have said, okay, now he gets bombarded by another mad science ray, and Bruce Banner and the Hulk are combined into one entity, and now he's a permanent member of the Avengers. If they had done that, though, we probably never would have gotten Captain America, at least not in the present day. We would have had Captain America stories from the 40s and the 50s, but we wouldn't have had Captain America join the Avengers in issue 4 or 5 of the Avengers. But I think that it's very interesting that they chose to go in this direction with the Hulk, and in so doing, they decided to bring Captain America into the present day. And, of course, that had a huge impact on the Avengers series, and then the Marvel Universe as a whole, because after this, eventually Captain America, he starts co-starring in Tales of Suspense, getting his own feature, which I've read a little bit of that and really enjoyed it. And then eventually the Hulk, he goes on to have his own solo series once again in Tales to Astonish, and he eventually pushes Giant Man and the Wasp out of that title, and then he takes over that title as the new ongoing solo feature. So it all worked out eventually, but reading these early issues of the Avengers, I did find that very interesting, that out of all of the characters that they could have done anything they wanted to with, the Hulk was the one character, and then they chose to more or less keep him the same and get rid of him because he didn't really fit with the rest of the team and this whole team dynamic idea. So I found that very interesting, and this was just me rambling about some early thoughts on the Avengers that I wanted to share. So I hope that you guys like this video. If you want to see this kind of thing from me in the future, where I just kind of chat and ramble about stuff that I'm reading and my own little unique thoughts about these books, tell me in the comments below. Maybe you guys aren't interested in this. Maybe you'd just rather see me do review type things in the future, and if that's the case, I'd still encourage you to give this video a like and share and comment and subscribe. Do all that cool stuff. In the meantime, I will see you guys in the future. Have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.